Hi, listeners. Unlike our usual news insights, today I would like to share with you an interview with an awesome guest. He's our beloved jingle composer, Matt Cline. We talked about his journey to being a composer, his passion for music, and his ingenious musical, Shanghai, as a high school student. Please enjoy our conversation. Joining me today is Matt Cline. Hi, Matt. How are you doing?
Hi, Matthew. I'm doing great. Thank you.
So, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, my name is Matt Cline. I am currently at Shanghai American School, and I'm going to be a junior in high school, and I play the trumpet, and I'm a composer as well.
You're a composer as a rising junior, correct?
Yeah, I've been composing pretty much since I was really, really young, and it's always been something I love doing.
What made you start?
Well, I learned piano when I was 3 years old, and so part of it was I always found a lot of interest in making up melodies, and then I ended up learning how to write them down, and those turned into piano pieces, which turned into piano and violin pieces, and eventually I was writing lots of music.
So you're telling me that you wrote a lot of music since you were young?
Yeah, kind of. Well, I didn't have like a composition teacher when I was super young, but I was writing a lot of like random stuff, and yeah, I was technically composing, I guess.
Technically compose. I mean, honestly though, I feel like for most composers, they never went through like, the traditional route where you like, I'm sorry, not traditional, like quote unquote traditional, but like traditional in a sense that like most traditional like education is like, okay, you go through the tutor, for example, let's just say math, you go through like a tutor, and then the tutor teaches you like the Pythagorean theorem, like a squared plus b squared equals c squared, and then teaches you how to apply it. But that's really different from the composition. Would you say that?
Yeah, I think a lot of what I learned from composition early on is mostly through listening to stuff and also looking at like scores, and kind of a lot of it was self-taught, I guess.
I mean, yeah, pretty much. But like, so what score did you study the most?
Right now, or
I mean, anything. Okay, what score are you studying now?
right now I'm looking at Elgar Enigma variations, just because I find it very interesting. I used to look at a bunch of like Beethoven symphonies just for orchestration purposes, because they're like really brilliantly orchestrated. And
You think so?
I just think like, even though it's maybe not as like harmonically complex, although it is definitely for the time, and I think it's not like a Mahler symphony or anything like that large, but even if you look at like symphony like number 1 or number 2, it has like really insightful orchestrations and ways to write for different instruments that I just pay attention to, I guess.
Like, well, could you give me like an example, for example, from like Beethoven's C major symphony, the first one?
Okay, yeah. So in Beethoven's C major symphony, there's a lot of movement between strings, strings, oboe, and flute. And I think one thing that a lot of like at least I did for a very long time is kind of used oboe and flute very interchangeably. But through Beethoven's like writing, he's really taken like certain characteristics from both instruments, especially like the differences they have in timbre, or like the differences they have in like playing a certain musical phrase, and then kind of use them in very specific plates to kind of echo the strings melodies. And I think it's just really nice.
I mean, yeah, it's funny that you actually kind of brought up like just interchanging and weaving in between the the woodwind and also the string section. Am I correct?
Yeah.
I mean, he used that very not it's not just his early symphonies. Actually, his third symphony. In fact, the last movement, the opening, the E flat major, symphony. Yeah, the dun.
Eroica.
Yeah. And then the second time when he I can't. What the second time when he iterated the bass line, he actually swapped between the woodwinds and the string pizzicatos. It's like a very humorous effect that he actually brought into the entire piece, because it's not very Haydn-esque, honestly. And
Yeah.
people during that time were like expecting the music to be more Haydn-esque. Just give me a rondo form instead.
Right.
Give me a variation on theme type of music, and no sophisticated orchestration. But instead, he kind of plays around with it in the beginning.
Yeah, I think it's really great when composers find ways to add like humorous ideas in music, because it keeps the listeners listening, and also the people who are like analyzing it afterwards. It's fun, I guess.
Yeah, no, it is. It is fun. Actually, the first time when one of my professor, he's actually a music theory professor. He also teaches music psychology. Um, we were actually analyzing Beethoven 3, the fourth movement. And the funny thing is that Beethoven, like we said, the typical like last movement form is usually a rondo form, but Beethoven decided to break all those rules. He decided to put a sonata with a rondo, with a fugue, and then with a variation of theme. Like he combined all these forms together and pieced it together into this one hectic, chaotic masterpiece, which is Symphony Number 3. It just tells you
Yeah.
how out of the world he was, and this was only like early in his time. This wasn't. We're not even talking about his ninth and his quartet yet.
Right. I personally really enjoyed the first movement, although yeah, it is probably the most played. I don't know. I find a certain sense of like it's pretty glorious. When you listen to like a good recording of it, it just sounds amazing. The
Yeah, what's
first
your favorite
movement.
recording?
Oh, I listened to Herbert von Karajan's recording with the Berlin
Yeah,
Phil.
Karajan. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's up there. So what's interesting is why don't you study composers such as like Rimsky-Korsakov, or even Tchaikovsky for that matter, for like orchestration purposes?
I have, I guess, but it's not exactly what I don't know. I've been like I've analyzed something with my composition teacher with Beethoven, and I kind of just on my own kind of looked at a bunch of the other ones. Like I've looked at stuff by Rimsky-Korsakov, like for example Capriccio Espagnol, or like a bunch of the other like larger, like huge like symphonic works that incorporates lots of different instruments and different forms. But I don't know. I just haven't really paid much attention to that. Although I obviously he wrote an entire book on orchestration, so you know.
Facts. I mean, that he is one of the greatest like orchestrators probably in history. So I wanted to go into a little bit into your recent musical masterpiece, Shanghai. Could you give us like for the audience who don't know about this musical that you actually wrote, could you tell us could you tell us a little bit about what Shanghai is?
For sure. So Shanghai is a musical that is set in 1930s Shanghai, and it revolves around the story of this boy named Tom and this Chinese girl called Lily, and how their relationship plays out with Lily's very strict Chinese family, and also the plot intertwines, with like the experiences of like crooked police, trade deals with gangsters, and also exploiting loopholes in the 1930s judicial system. There's a lot of very interesting stuff that happens in the musical. And
Wait,
yeah.
this sounds like Shanghai Tan. Are they the same thing?
Oh no. It's not. It yeah. I mean, the costumes look pretty similar, but no, it's a completely different plot, and a lot of it is about the very internationally diverse and very culturally diverse place that Shanghai was, especially in the 30s at that time.
So how
There were all, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
There were all these like the international settlement, as you probably know. There was lots of different countries that were putting down their like flag there, and it was just a very like culturally diverse place at the time, and that's something I wanted to kind of write a musical about, and especially talk about some of the relationships between different cultures, and that's part of the musical. Yeah.
So what's actually really remarkable to me first is obviously the historical context for our listeners who don't know. During this time, it was a very hectic time, at least for China. I think it was after World War One. China was going through a lot of invasions from the foreign influences. But what is more remarkable to me is how, as high schoolers, you guys were able to put this production together, because it's not just the composition, right? The composition itself is already quite something else. What I was really astonished by is how you guys put this production together, because I know Sarah, which is a student of mine, talked about how she wanted to put the dance together. So tell us how you guys put this entire production together.
Yeah, so it was quite a long and complicated process to kind of produce the whole thing. We had to first, figure out what kind of venue we were going to, do it at. And then one of the main things we had to do is first we had to like assemble a team that covered like each of the aspects, like ticket sales, marketing, finances, front of house, as well as, making sure we're recruiting stage managers, pit orchestra, and of course auditioning for the cast. And so there were a lot of different moving parts, and we made lots of mistakes along the way, but it ended up working out really, really well, and everybody involved did a great job.
Right. And most of this are like student led, right?
It's entirely student led, actually. So yeah, I was essentially the executive producer for the show, along with my friend Andrew, who co-wrote the script with me. And we basically just went through the entire process, communicating with all the government officials, with ourselves, figuring all out that out, getting our script approved, also, figuring out ticket sales ourselves, getting everything printed, revising sheet music, everything like that was pretty much all on students.
So you said like you guys needed to get the government official approved for in terms of like script censorship and all that?
Yeah, I mean, it was more of just making sure that the musical was, I guess, appropriate or in line with politically correct, basically. And it wasn't much of a problem, considering the villain in the story is a cop from the Kuomintang. So
right.
Yeah, that kind of I don't know, didn't end up being that much of a problem in terms of government approval.
That's hilarious. So you said this entire thing was student led, and was there like any like parental help along the way, or just like there was just like absolutely no adult involvement in this entire process?
Well, I think there was a certain degree of like advice given by our parents, although a lot of times we didn't end up listening to them. But they definitely helped support us by like trying to get their friends and family to buy tickets, and of course SAS did support us as well by lending us costumes and giving us rehearsal space and everything like that. So we have to thank SAS for that as well.
Yeah, I mean, Shanghai American School, I mean, I'm an alumni of Shanghai American School, so I'm the first to witness like the amount of support they give to students, not just like academic pursuits, but also artistic pursuits. Is actually one of the rare things that actually separates Shanghai American School from like a lot of the international schools out there.
Yep, I would agree with you there.
Yeah, I mean, as a student, for me, I wasn't able to achieve as much as you guys could, but I definitely was able to spread my wings under their guidance. Being able to just perform, being able to also write music and produce for a lot of films. And I'm sure you're probably gonna get a lot of gigs just because you're such an awesome composer already.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think Shanghai was certainly a very unique experience. I've never done anything like this before. And I don't know, if this is something I'll keep doing, but I guess it was just a very rewarding experience to produce this musical.
Of course, definitely. Before we end the show, we usually like to do something called the music of the week in surround sound, which is basically we like to tell our audience what we're going to listen to for the next coming week. So let me
Okay.
start. Yeah, let me
Okay.
start. For me, my recommendation for next week for our listeners is Mahler Symphony Number 2 in C minor.
Hey.
Especially the last movement. Um, this is this is probably ever since Beethoven, one of the very few Beethoven Ninth Symphony. Speaking of Beethoven, Beethoven's Chorale, which is the very famous Ode to Joy, the probably one of the few symphonies that actually consists of an entire choir section, especially in the last movement. And I love this symphony. This symphony is actually recommended by Philip Green, which was my high school orchestra teacher. He recommended this piece to me. And the first time I listened to the opening, the intense tremolo, I immediately fell in love with this symphony. This is one of my favorite symphonies, if not the favorite, the best symphony of my life. Definitely, our listeners have to check this symphony out. It's remarkable, although it is a 1 hour and 30 minutes journey. How about you, Matt?
So, should I stick to classical music?
You can pick whatever you want. We don't discriminate.
Anything. Wow.
Of course.
All right. Well, in that case, I would actually I will go with a a classical piece, I guess. I would like to recommend Maurice Ravel's Rhapsody Espagnole. It's a 4-movement kind of suite based on a bunch of like Spanish melodies, and especially the first movement, which is just hauntingly beautiful and features some like amazing like writing in general, and the 4th movement is just chaotic and bombastic and overall very powerful as well. And I don't know, it's a very enjoyable piece because you can really hear the Spanish flavor in it. So there you go.
Well, thank you, Matt. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, listeners, for listening to our conversations. And see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.